I want to cover as much as economic concepts as possible in the macroeconomy as fast as I can. So let's see how it goes, right? Okay, so for starters, let's talk about the business cycles. Okay, you remember the business cycles that we have learned in different textbooks. Different business cycles tend to have slightly different names, but for the sake of this video, I want to explain the four stages this way. At the very top, you have the peak. When the economy is growing, we call it the upswing. When the economy is going down, we call it the downswing. And at the very bottom, we call it the trough, right? So when it is growing, upswing. At the peak, we call it the peak. When it is going down, we call it the downswing. And at the very bottom, we call it the trough, right? So how come these business cycles are created? It's you and I, the society, that creates the business cycle. What I specifically mean by that is, you remember the GDP formula, right? GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Okay. Consumption, private domestic investment, government, exports minus the imports, right? So that's simply the GDP. Okay. So now if you honestly consider, or if you consider about this is how it's going to work. Okay. So let's say, for an example, roughly consumption, or the C, accounts to about anything between 55 to 60% of the economy. So that's the largest part, right? And then you have the private domestic investors, the government, and the exports minus the imports, right? So what happens is, when people are feeling that the environment is optimistic, okay, they tend to spend. They tend to spend on more consumption. For an example, right? Let's say I'm doing a job and I feel that the economy is doing really well, and the things are looking really bright. So what do? I might go and end up leasing a car. I might start building a new house. Or for that matter, I might go and buy branded clothing. Or for that matter, I will eat from fancy restaurants and so on and so forth. So there are all sorts of things that we do, when we feel optimistic, right? So all of a sudden, look at it this way. When I do that, let's say, for an example, I go and buy goods from Kiel's supermarket. Okay, so what happens to the profits of Kiel's supermarket when I spend my money over there? It tends to go up, right? So when the Kiel supermarket's profit goes up, what is going to happen to the salaries of their employees? That goes up. So what happens is, then their staff members can go elsewhere and then they can spend more. So all the people are feeling optimistic, including myself. So then there is the upswing, and then at a certain point in time it peaks out, right? So just imagine that for some reason, I hope not, touch wood, I got fired from my job. So all of a sudden I lose my income. Now I can't support my family. Okay. So then what is going to happen to my spending power? Spending power comes down, which means now I can't go to Kiel supermarket. Now I can't end up buying the goods that I used to buy earlier earlier with my salary. So now what is going to happen is that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm spending less, and as a result, the Kiel supermarket is going to spend. Kiel supermarket profit levels will come down because one customer is not going there. So what's going to happen to their employees' salaries? That's going to go down, right? So what's going to happen to their spending capability? That's going to come down, right? So then, very simply, how these four cycles get created is based on the way how people spend, which is C plus I plus G plus X minus M, right? Now, I'm going to make a statement, and that statement is this: it is not good for the economy to grow too fast. Why? What's wrong with that? Okay, so let's take a vehicle that is going on a highway, right? And imagine that the speed limit is 100. What is going to happen if this vehicle start going at 200 kilometers an hour? Driver might not be able to control the vehicle. There's a bigger probability of him meeting up with an accident. So what is he doing? He's going way over capacity, right? So what happens is this: how can an economy grow very fast? Very simple. How can economy grow very fast is when people have more and more money. Now, how do you make more and more money available? Simple: bringing down the interest rates and encouraging people to spend. So what happens is this: you are encouraging your people to spend, that's fine, and people are spending, that's also fine. But what happens is, there is always a capacity. Okay, right? None of us as human beings, as far as money is concerned, we are not bottomless barrels. We all have a bottom. Now what happens is, for an example, imagine if the credit card interest rates today are 24% per annum, right? And if it is brought down to 6% per annum, what is going to happen? People are really 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 going to get motivated and spend, right? Okay, so the now people will go all out and start spending their money. So this is what is going to happen. Everybody has a credit limit, and not only that, credit card interest rate will not necessarily remain at 6% forever. Okay, all of a sudden credit card interest rate goes up. Let's say it becomes 12%, and all of a sudden now your interest component itself has doubled, right? And all of a sudden that's going to eat into your money that you have, the disposable income. So what is going to happen is this: you must be careful even with your growth, just like you got to be careful when you're accelerating your vehicle to a limit which you can control. Okay, so I hope I made that point very clear. So the growth is good, but growth too fast is not good for an economy, right? So you got to be mindful about the growth, and you got to take things like, for an example, the capacity of the economy. And also on top of that, there is always a problem with regards to the growth, that is inflation. Okay, so all of a sudden the growth is happening, that sounds great, but the problem with the growth is when it is fast, and when it is really fast, economy has a problem, right? So growth comes with its own share of problems, which is, for an example, inflation. All right, so you got to be careful of that. So growth is happening, inflation is happening, and all of a sudden that might not be very healthy for an economy, right? So you need to understand that all of a sudden, if you are accelerating your if you accelerate your car, right? For an example, in the context of economics, all of a sudden, you didn't even know it, all of a sudden you have exceeded the speed limit. Now right now your vehicle is going at 120 kilometers an hour, right? You're 20 kilometers faster than what you should go, right? So let me ask you a question. What is it easier? What is easier for you to stop the vehicle at 120 kilometers an hour or 160 kilometers an hour? For it to slow down to 100? Answer is obvious, right? The answer is, when it is 120 kilometers an hour, it becomes much faster or much easier for you to slow down the vehicle. Same way, when the economy is growing faster than what it should, as soon as you realize it, you need to slow it down. Now, this is where there are two policies called the fiscal policy and the monetary policy that comes into play. Okay, so what does the fiscal policy and the monetary policy represent? Simple. Fiscal policy represents the government expenditure and or taxation. Okay, hear me out. Fiscal policy represents government expenditure and or taxes. Okay, when does it generally take place? Generally, we are talking about, when you talk about the fiscal policy, we are talking about the annual budget of a country. And then you have the monetary policy, which is owned by the central bank, right? And what do they very simply do? Or I'm at least trying to make it sound very simple. They manage the interest rates so that you can manage the money supply. Very simple, right? When the interest rate goes up, people demand for money less, and when the interest rate goes down, people tend to demand for money, much more money, because you can do a lot of investments at cheap rates. So this is what you need to do. When the economy is growing too fast, more than the capacity that the economy can stand, it's like your vehicle is going over the speed limit. Soon as you recognize it, you need to slow it down. How do you slow it down? Simple, by applying the brakes. And applying the brakes in the context of economics is called contractionary fiscal policy and contractionary monetary policy. Okay, so what will that do? Very simple. It will ensure that the economy comes back to its limit. Okay, generally showed by the macroeconomic equilibrium, where you have the aggregate demand curve, short run aggregate supply curve, and the long run aggregate supply curve. So it will bring it back to its limit and ensure that inflation is under control. How do you do that? Contractionary fiscal policy and the contractionary monetary policy. So very simple. How do you apply the contractionary fiscal policy? Simple. Reduce the government expenditure and or increase the taxes. So reduce the government expenditure so that they spend less than what they should, or what they probably could. And then when you increase the taxes, what happens? The disposable income of people tend to come down. So as a result, in one way you're applying brakes, and the power of the brake is even more when you increase the interest rate and reduce the demand for money. So very simple. I mean, probably you would have heard, either your relations or your mother or your father saying something like this. Now it's a good time. The bank's offering good interest rates. It's good time for us to deposit our money in a bank, right? Not necessarily build a house or buy a car because the interest rates are very attractive. So then all of a sudden you can slow down the economy. With slowing down of the economy, you can also slow down the inflation rate. Okay. So now what happens is economy is has peaked and then it is going down. We call it a downturn. And by the way, 2 quarters of consecutive negative economic growth is called an economic recession. And then at the very bottom of the business cycle, you have the trough, right? So what happens there is that now inflation is okay, inflation is under control. So when it is going down, the problem is that there's another problem that economy faces, which is called unemployment. Okay, so unemployment becomes another issue as far as the economy is concerned, right? Especially when it is going down, right? So now all of a sudden, the vehicle that was going at 120 kilometers an hour, the speed limit is 100. So in this example, is going at 70 kilometers an hour. Okay. Now you have 30 more kilometers that you can go, so you can go much faster. What should you do? And why you should do it? Okay, what you should do is very simple. Now it's time for you to apply the accelerator, okay, for the economy to move on slightly faster. So very simple, you apply the accelerator, meaning what? Now again, the two policies, fiscal policy and the monetary policy. Simple. Fiscal policy is where you talk about the government expenditure and the taxation, and or taxation, I must say. And then with the monetary policy, we are talking about the money supply in the marketplace. So what should you do? Simple. Downswing or a trough, what you should do is you must apply the accelerator to bring it back to the capacity of the economy, or in the case of highway, 100 kilometers an hour. So very simple. These two policies are called expansionary fiscal policy and the expansionary monetary policy. Okay. So what happens is this: you accelerate means, as far as the monetary policy is concerned, you bring down the interest rate so that all of a sudden, I'm sure you would have heard this at home as well or somewhere else for sure, that now there is no point in keeping money in the bank because the banks are paying very little interest. So what do the central bank really want the citizens in the country to do? The message is very clear: go out there and spend, probably get into more housing, it's time to do certain investments and so on, because right now unemployment is an issue. Okay, or unemployment could be an issue. Inflation at this point in time might not necessarily be a huge issue. So when you bring down the interest rates, people will say, all right, now I think it's good time for us to start investing on something. So let's build a house, let's get into that dream business that we want to start, and all sorts of things. And all of a sudden, you may want to go and buy branded clothes using your credit card and so on, because the interest rates have come down seriously. All right. So this is how the system works. It's very simple, right? So what you need to understand is business cycles are created by what? People like you and I, as well as the society, like the government together, imports and exports, which is C plus I plus G plus X minus M, creates the business cycle. So at the top, what is the problem? The problem is you have high inflation. At the bottom, what is the problem? You have problems with unemployment. So inflation is also not good. Unemployment is also not good. Okay. So it's like a double-edged sword. You need to manage the economy very carefully in order to get the best possible result. So what you need to do is, when the economy is growing too fast, apply the brakes, which is contractionary fiscal policy and the contractionary monetary policy. When the economy is growing too slow or going too slow, it's time to accelerate. Expansionary fiscal policy, expansionary monetary policy. So uh, there is a lot more to this than you need to take a look at certain graphs and so on and so forth. But I think I have spoken for about 15 minutes or so at a stretch, and hopefully you can take a look at this video and take something out of it. Thank you very much, guys. Good night and nice talking to you. Hope to talk to you again with some other video. Thank you.